Good evening. Good evening. This is Rachel, and I'm going to attempt to do my 10-minute summary on the April book club reading. And we didn't pick one book, we picked a theme with the idea that you could read anything on that theme. So the theme was neuroscience in learning and development. And here are some of the books that we talked about. So first one by Stella Collins, Neuroscience, Learning and Development. A couple of books by Patty Shank, The Practice of Feedback for Deeper Learning and Managing Memory for Deeper Learning. There is another one there's like a trilogy, which I didn't realize, so I only got two. This one, I'll say something about this, Brain Savvy Business by Jan Hills. And then a couple of other books that I had on audio, so I can't show you them, but one was Make It Stick, and the other one was I always forget the other one, Make It Stick, and then the other one was How We Learn. Okay, so they are the titles that I'm going to do a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through. But first of all, just by way of introduction, why did we pick neuroscience as our theme? So actually, it was my idea, and the reason why I suggested it is I see it a lot these days. People talk about, oh, the latest neuroscience says, or this training program draws on the principles of neuroscience, and it's like a label, it's like a badge of honor. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I've been a learning and development practitioner for a long time, so then when you see these labels, you're like, well, what is the latest neuroscience? Is it things I already know? Is it things I'm doing? Or is it something really new? So just from my own curiosity, I wanted to get behind these labels. And I think part of me was a little bit cynical because it's just like marketing, it's just like sticking a label on something, it's like name dropping a secret ingredient for a laundry detergent. Just by saying something's got neuroscience in it, if that's going to sell it, then that's a good label. But I was kind of wondering, is it like Emperor's New Clothes? Is it like things we've always been doing, things we've always done? So that's why I was curious, not just to read one book, but to look at a few and to understand exactly what all the fuss is about. So what did I find? Well, I think I found exactly that if you've been in learning and development for a long time, like I have, over 25 years, then there are things that we know about and we do because it's good practice, because we've been trained that way, and so on. And then to then read about it in a book and find, oh, that's actually a neuroscience thing, it's a bit like, oh, okay, but I was doing that anyway. So let's give you some examples. So we'll start with this book. So Stella Collins, Neuroscience for Learning and Development. So I bought this and I attempted to read it cover to cover, and I actually found it really hard because she divides it up into sections, and the sections, the chapters themselves are quite helpful, but I think when you're a learning and development practitioner, you want this information because you want to do something with it, so you want something practical. And we don't all have time to read all the background and the hows, whys and wherefores. So basically she kind of picks out principles and then would go into like the background, the science and so on, and then go to what you can do and how to use it and some examples, which is really, really nice. But as I found that as I moved through the book, I was wanting to read the science bit less and less and more just the practical bit. So my kind of conclusion on this book is actually this probably came out the best book. Doesn't mean you can stop watching though. It did come out as a really good book because it was the most comprehensive, but she recommends you read it cover to cover. I found it hard to do that. But just to give you a flavour, I'll give you a flavour of some of the things it talks about, what it actually says as is neuroscience. So there was a section on questions. There was a section on stories being sticky, and that's something we hear quite a lot these days. And I think that's something that's talked about a lot, the power of storytelling, because it's relatable and you can remember it. So, you know, to say that's to do with neuroscience, yeah, well, it might be, but it's also something that we kind of know about these days. Little things like the fact that dopamine is released when we're curious. So curiosity is a good thing. So helping your learners to be curious and, you know, giving them questions, don't give them the whole answer. So things like neuroplasticity, brain plasticity, very big words. Basically, that's associative learning. Things like mind maps, things like repetition, spaced learning, smaller group learning, reward, emotional and physical state. So all those things were mentioned. The one thing I did like about Stella's book is she referenced other people where they've done work and come up with models. So like Colin Rose with the master model of accelerated learning. And then just, so this is where I get a bit cynical. So, you know, she talks about things like using objects and stationary craft materials so people can construct their ideas in a creative way. And I'm kind of like, yeah, but we've been doing that for years, you know, the kind of active training and active learning. I remember quite a few years ago in my organization, we used a company and they did something called brain friendly learning, and we trained all of our internal trainers on brain friendly learning. And it was all that very, you know, practical stuff, having tangible objects for people to play with in the training room, play music when they come in, you know, making it very sensory experience and making activities as real and physical as possible. So some of us have been doing that for a long time, and these principles have been around for a long time. So sticking a label on things, saying, oh, we use neuroscience, is like, well, maybe you're just using good practice. So I think it is worth being aware of that. But yeah, Stella talks about lots of other things in the book. She talks about, you know, motivation, multiple intelligence theories, how the memory works, you know, and digital learning principles. So real comprehensive lot. So that was a really good read. In terms of the other books, so Make It Stick. This was probably the first book I read on how the brain works. And I actually read this with a different point of view. I read this as a learner because I'm in a different country trying to learn a language. And so I listened to Make It Stick as an audiobook. So I would say my conclusion for that one is it has, if you're interested in designing training or learning, it has a strong education bias. So it's written more for teachers. A lot of the case studies are classroom based. There were some really nice stories which did stick, and I could tell you some of those stories, but they were kind of less applicable and relevant to the training room. But yeah, but it was a really nice book to listen to. So, and I know teachers that have listened to it, and it's changed the way they work, and it's changed how often they give out tests and how they do their tests and so on. So if you're imparting information that people have to learn and memorize, like knowledge, very knowledge-based programs, then Make It Stick would certainly give you some good insight into that, drawing on lots of evidence. So the other one that I listened to, in fact, I didn't finish it, but that was How We Learn. So this is about the biology of memory. And again, it covers lots of things similar to Make It Stick. I struggled with the audiobook just because of the voice. Funny thing, the voice that was used to narrate, I just didn't get on with, so I couldn't listen to it. But the topics covered, yeah, biology of memory, power of forgetting, retention breaking, spacing out, testing, problem solving, interleaving, tapping without the subconscious, learning without thinking. So again, some useful themes there, and sleep as well being another theme. So to talk then about the two books by Patty Shank, Manage Memory for Deeper Learning and Practice and Feedback for Deeper Learning. these I found really nice, and they were really focused. So the Manage Memory one is 21 evidence-based and easy to apply tactics that support memory. So very specific focus. So if that's what you need to do, then that would be a good book. And the other one for deeper learning gives 26 tactics for deeper learning and application. So kind of they say what they were on the tin, but she does go quite deep. I'm just reading my notes here on screen. So she goes into the science, the deep learning book. She talks about learnability, prior knowledge, memory, mental effort, social processes, transfer, and very, very practically based. So like analyze the job content, practice for self-direction, practicing for transfer, practicing for remembering, and practicing giving effective feedback. So really focused on kind of learning practitioners, learning and development practitioners as an audience rather than the general audience. So I think that's what sets her books apart. And she says at the beginning that she uses research from training rather than general learning research. So it does make it more practical, and she has some nice checklists in those. So yeah, if you are a learning practitioner getting really deep into things, then these would be great books to have on your shelf. And that brings me to the last book, which actually I had this on my shelf and I hadn't read it. And it was only when I was looking for something, I was looking for something on curiosity, curiosity and learning, and I wanted to, do some research on curiosity and how it works and how it helps, what it means, how you stimulate curiosity. And so I went through all my books, all of the ones that I've got that cover how the brain works, and I looked up in the back curiosity, and actually Jan's book came out really, really well. What I like about this book is it's not just about how the brain works for learning and learning designers, but it's, as it says, it's called Brain Savvy Business. So it just takes more of a generalist approach, and she covers 8 principles from neuroscience and how to apply them. However, one of those chapters is specifically to do with learning. So yeah, creating brain savvy learning. So there's a chapter specifically on learning, and then the other chapters are kind of more general, which is absolutely fine. It works completely fine because neuroscience doesn't just apply to learning and development. It applies to how the brain works for all kinds of things. So the 8 different principles that she covers are threat and reward, social connection, mindset matters, emotions. That's the first 4. But yeah, just to interject and say, that's what I liked about this book, is it was thematic. It took themes which I find it easier to remember than some neuroscience principle, if you know what I mean. So rather than, neuroplasticity, that kind of doesn't mean anything to me, or non-associative learning, I'd have to kind of look it up each time what that means. But a theme like social connection or emotion, I can remember that because that's more everyday language, it's more relatable. So she uses these lovely generic themes. That's the first 4. Then the second 4 are, well, there was principle was about learning. She talked about learning myths. Then habits was number 6, then managing energy, and then being a brain savvy leader. So I really liked that principle approach, and I found this book kind of easy to read as well. I haven't read it cover to cover, but I've dipped in and out of it, and it just kind of makes sense. And again, it's very, very practical in the way it's put together with nice summaries and steps and models and so on. So that was my whistle-stop tour on neuroscience for learning and development in terms of some of the books out there. I am aware there are more. I couldn't cover them all. There's a lot more to say on neuroscience in learning and development, and I am still kind of studying and getting my head around what's out there. So yeah, watch this space. I might do some more work and get a little something together for you. But for now, that's it. Thank you very much.